There's no need to go to the next level of we're going to place fake pre-orders and then cancel them, and I'm going to try and use my influence in the industry to prevent you from selling your books.
And instead of it being a discussion about how terrible writing is in a comic, instead the guy ends up spending the next forever long having to defend himself instead. Some people it works against. In this case, it has backfired horribly.
Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning. You know who it is. It's Leonard French, your favorite copyright attorney. We're here on Sunday morning to educate the lawful masses, as we do. And we have a special guest with us today. This just happened. Sethan is here. I happened to mention the diversity in comics story that we were going to cover today, and he wanted to pop in and talk about it, and we were having a great conversation. So I thought, why not start there? So we are talking about this graphic novel, Jawbreaker's Lost Souls. It is made by Richard Meyer, who calls himself Zack on the Diversity and Comics YouTube channel. And his YouTube channel's here, and you can see he has 69,000 subscribers, links to his Indiegogo, calls himself Diversity in Comics. What does he do? You understand that he criticizes, he's a pretty big critic of modern comic books. Sethan, can you maybe go into a little bit more depth about what he does on his YouTube channel?
Well, I should first mention that's actually a Photoshop of Mark Waid from Marvel Comics looking like a bouncer because of the video.
Okay. So that's who that is. Is Mark Waid is on the opposite side of this thing. But first, who is Zack, and what is Zack doing on his channel?
What it basically boils down to is, in the last few years, companies like Marvel, and to a lesser extent DC, but mostly Marvel, have kind of gone a little bit crazy in terms of going off to the far left side of things and have started doing some rather odd things with their writing. They replaced Iron Man with a young black lady. They replaced Spider-Man with a young black guy. And a bunch of other stuff. Now, there's nothing wrong with that inherently.
No.
But what people have noticed is it's being done in a very ham-fisted manner. So there is...
It's not being done in a graceful, manner with the writing and the transition.
Yeah.
It's sort of just happening.
There's a really good example. With Captain America, I'm sure everyone has seen Avengers at this point. There's his friend Falcon, who is this black medic dude who is a guy who flies around. Now, at one point in the comics, Cap, for some reason, has to stand down, and he passes the shield onto the other guy, Falcon. And fans didn't have a problem with this because the guy had done his time, he was a sidekick, he had learned the ropes. Meanwhile, if we look at the Iron Man version of this, where Riri Williams basically steals an Iron Man suit, reworks a bit of it, and says it's now hers. And this all happens out of nowhere. Now, people reacted to that very negatively. It was a poorly thought out storyline. And there's a lot of this going on. Now, people like Diversity in Comics come in where they are basically buying the comics, reading them, reviewing them, and basically saying, this writing is terrible. This artwork is awful. This is just garbage. What are you doing?
Now, I just need to be clear here because this story involves like a censorship element. He's not saying don't have black people in the comic book.
No, he's just saying...
He's not saying some stuff like that. He's saying diversity in comics is not code for anti-diversity, right?
Not as far as I'm aware. Really...
I just wanted to make sure because I've seen some allegations on the other side that he's this horrible person.
Well, that, unfortunately, is really standard practice at this point for... When there is a person that is deemed by the mob to be anti-diversity or anti-progressive, you just start making wild accusations, often baseless, and then start throwing them out there like spaghetti against the wall to see what sticks. And instead of it being a discussion about how terrible writing is in a comic, instead the guy ends up spending the next forever long having to defend himself instead. And, trying not to get thrown out of the industry or not getting his reputation completely trashed. Some people it works against. In this case, it has backfired horribly, as I'm sure we'll basically cover as we talk about the rest of the story.
And let's see, there's also a Patreon that I want to bring up here.
Yeah,
Here we go.
he had a huge spike in funding yesterday due to an incident that came up. So basically what's happened is he put together this Indiegogo. Effectively, someone said put up or shut up at some point, and said, if you think you can do better, do it. So he hired 2 veteran comic book artists, Ethan Van Sciver and some other fellow whose name I do not know, to draw the comic. He did some writing work on it, and so on and so forth, as you do. And then they were like, okay, here's our Indiegogo, back it there. We will find a publisher, and then we will, send it out to the masses who want it, because we're tired of there being subpar graphic novels on the market. So that's what they did.
Sure. So they have this successful Indiegogo campaign, and
Right.
are did they look for publishers after the campaign separately, or
Well, I'm
at
not
some
sure
point they
what the timeline is, but they basically went out to find a publisher as they were doing their Indiegogo. And eventually they found this small publisher called Antarctic Press. They've been around since the 1980s, about 85. They basically approached them and said, look, we've done all the work. We don't need you to pay us. We just want you to cover the cost of printing it all and putting it to the shops, and then we'll split the money, and as you do. So that happened, and there was a big announcement on Twitter saying, hey, we're going to be publishing this thing. And all the people who had been haranguing the Diversity in Comics guy, Zack, basically turned around and attacked Antarctic Press, saying, you do realize he's all these horrible things. If you do this, we won't be happy with you, etc., etc., etc. It was also discovered parallel to this, roughly speaking, that on Facebook, groups of independent comic book selling shops were basically getting together and saying, we're going to pre-order the books and then dump them so that they can't be sold, effectively sending them back to the warehouse, meaning there'd be a massive amount of overprinting and they would lose money. They were saying, we're not going to stock it at all for customers. We're not even going to take pre-orders, some were saying. There's one in Ireland, Big Bang Comics, who I'm sad to say, basically came out and said, we're not going to stock it at all. Go to these other comic book stalls if you want to buy it, but we're not going to get it. And Antarctic Press continued to receive death threats throughout the day. And on Monday, that fellow we saw on the video there, Mark Waid, who is a big guy at Marvel, I think he's in charge of one of their comic book lines, I don't know which one, spent the entire day on Twitter working with other comic book artist people who have been criticized by Zack to ruin his name and reputation and do everything they could to whip up the mob. And it worked, basically. By that evening, Antarctic Press called up Diversity in Comics on the phone and said, I'm sorry, we have received so much backlash over this, we can't do this. And Diversity in Comics had to go away and find an alternative. The comic is being done by Diversity in Comics. They're now going to be self-publishing it through their own publishing company. And they're in the top 3 best-selling comics of this month in terms of graphic novels. They've already bypassed them all.
Good on them for that.
Yeah.
I mean, this sounds pretty horrible. This kind of gatekeeping is what I'd call it.
Yeah, it's exactly that.
The saying that, well, first, here's what's terribly offensive to me. We are supposed to live in a country, in the United States, or frankly a society where working hard is rewarded with, the natural consequences of your hard work. So far, I haven't seen anything here that suggests that Jawbreakers, Zack/Richard Meyer, have done anything wrong here. So I'm not sure why, then, comic book stores would just refuse to sell his graphic novel, and conspire to sort of injure it as best they could. If they are upset at this comic book, the best thing they should do is ignore the heck out of it and tell all their friends to ignore the heck out of it. Not this Streisand effect of, here, let's generate this huge controversy and then all these people are going to want to buy it. I would never have known this existed, and now I am a Patreon supporter, and I'm going to go buy this comic book to support the anti-gatekeeping that I believe in. Now, if someone wants to stop me, you got to convince me what is wrong with Jawbreakers and Richard Meyer, because so far, everything that's been written is just normal vitriol and hate from people towards Jawbreakers and Richard Meyer Zack. I have seen nothing of actual evidence that this person deserves this level of divisiveness, let alone that I can look at their art on a website and I can see that their art seems to be decent. So, what's the big deal here? That, if other graphic novels get published, especially ones that are maybe not so great, I don't see why this one shouldn't be able to get published either on its merits.
And I think for me, if the problem is that he is criticizing other comics for bad writing or bad art, or not putting the time and effort into crafting really good stories, then to me the appropriate response is to buy his comic, critique it, and see if he lives up to his own standards. Right? Seems like
exactly.
an equal reaction, and that if he doesn't live up to his own standards, because we know that it's much easier to critique than it is to create, then you get to say, hey, look, you tried to create something and now it's being critiqued. How does that feel? Which I think like that's an appropriate response. But like me as the consumer, I don't necessarily want business owners having really ideological reasons for why they're stocking certain items and not others. I guess I would just prefer that, like, if I'm going to boycott something, then like let me boycott it. Let me make that decision.
Yeah, a consumer-driven boycott of something is allowable, but the middlemen, the providers basically saying, well, we're not going to let you have this, is not right at all. Now, I dropped some links into the stream chat for people to look at from boundingintocomics.com, which are 2 stories related to it. I also dropped one into sharing for you to have a quick glance at. The most relevant thing being a point by Mark Waid, the guy at Marvel, who basically was announcing on Twitter that he was calling Antarctic Press to talk to them about the folks over at Diversity Comics. So that happened the same day that they were dropped. So
there's some news here in your story that you posted into chat. It looks like a lot's been happening yesterday. Waid's Facebook and social media are down.
Yeah.
Antarctic Press has put out a statement that they have not been bullied.
Yeah, there was a post.
After saying that there were death threats and they had been bullied to heck, now they're saying they have not been bullied by any comics pro.
It's very strange. To give another example of things that have been...
someone is putting some pressure on. So I mean, if you were like the head of Marvel and you called up, Antarctic Press and you said, if you don't play ball, there's going to be bad things happening for you in the future. What are you going to do? Yeah. Like, you're a tiny indie comic book publisher, and now like, some multi-billion-dollar company is like, you're messing with our industry. Get out of here. Stop making waves.
There was a post from a person who claimed to be working inside Marvel, and I can link this to you later if you want to read it. And he basically said Mark Waid was called into the head editor's office in Marvel and was told to just shut down everything, shut up, and get back to his desk. He is pretty much as good as out of the industry, some people are saying, but...
Well, that's good, because you should not be doing this to people.
Right.
I mean, could you imagine if someone did this to our channel, or I mean, someone could probably effectively shut down our channel by making false accusations about me.
Yeah, absolutely.
And although I would continue publishing because I'm not beholden to anybody, that's what the world has come to these days, is that even your right to, like, your First Amendment right to free speech is now being challenged, which I realize is a government protection against government actions against free speech. But it's like there's this collusion, there's this illegal collusion in an industry. There seems to be like a conspiracy in an industry to keep someone out in an unlawful way. It's perfectly fine to keep someone out by saying, you know, hey, we bought this book and it sucks. Yeah. You can. That's what we do all the time. It's how I buy games on Steam or don't buy games on Steam based on how much the reviews say it sucks or it doesn't or whatever. So that's all perfectly fine. So there's no need to go to the next level of we're going to place fake pre-orders and then cancel them, and I'm going to try and use my influence in the industry to prevent you from selling your books. That does seem quite illegal, and frankly has generated more interest in this person's comic book. So good that at least the individual readers and other participants of social media see the situation and are calling it out for what it is. But it's also super scary that it's this easy to get a whole cadre of people against somebody. Did these people who are coming after Antarctic Press for wanting to publish so far a comic book I have heard nothing bad about, did these people need to be convinced by evidence? Did they need to hear the whole story? Did they need to do their research? I'm going to guess no. I'm going to guess that Mark Waid said, you know, loose the hounds, and the hounds didn't really need to ask any questions. The warriors didn't need to ask any questions. That's what's scary to me, is no one wants to do the homework. And sometimes, maybe even a majority of the time, they don't want to do the homework because they know what they might find. That if they actually did the work, they might find the truth, and the truth might not be as divisive as it sounded like coming from someone else. That's scary to me as an attorney and as an educated person, that it's so easy for people to just make conclusions and take action. That's a witch hunt. That's a literal witch hunt, and burning people at the stake without evidence was something that society went past because it was stupid. It was literally stupidity.
I hate to defend witch hunters here, but at least they had a set of rules regarding how things should be carried out. I mean, if they weighed less than a duck, then clearly they were a witch. There was at least some form of empirical, like, okay, if they're breaking the laws of physics, clearly they're a witch. You know, there is some kind of thought going in.
But let me explain. Let me pull back the green curtain a little bit, not on witch hunts, but on the whole trial by boiling water. There used to be trials, you know, let God decide whether someone's guilty or not by having them stick their hand into this pot of boiling water in front of everyone. And if they are unburned, then they are innocent, because how could God let an innocent person be burned under those circumstances? And what was really happening is the priest or other authorities would secretly pass judgment ahead of time, and the person would be given boiling water if they were guilty, if they were thought to be guilty, and they would be given tepid water if they were thought not to be guilty.
Yeah, there's a similar one in Europe to that, where there would be a stone at the bottom that had to pull the stone out of the boiling water. Their wounds would be dressed and then inspected a week later, and if it became infected, then they were guilty, and if they were not, then they were innocent. So there's a lot of stuff like that. But
right,
there is
tipping of the scale, or putting of the finger onto the scale to make the number show up something artificial, is something that humans have done every generation for their entire history. And we should not overlook that people who are making conclusions and not presenting any evidence are automatically suspect. It doesn't matter. You don't have to say what kind of people. You don't have to label them. It's anybody, including myself, who makes conclusions without presenting any evidence or source or citation or anything. And I mean, yes, we're having a conversation here. There are conclusions. How can you have a conversation without stating your conclusions and things? Yes, I get it. But some people are not available, or suddenly they aren't available to present their evidence when challenged. They suddenly don't think you're respecting them if you ask for evidence of their claims. Something's suddenly wrong with you if you are skeptical about their unproven conclusions. That's automatically suspect itself. It's sort of a psychological projection. Believe me, or you must disagree with me.
I think it's also sad that this was all being done sort of behind closed doors by people. But if someone is truly being sort of a problem, if they are saying racist things, if they're saying sexist things, and I'm not saying that that's what happened here, but isn't it better to start a conversation, like tell other people, it's like, okay, so when someone says this, it is racist because, and then explain your reasoning. And then other people can say like, oh, okay, I can see why that is. I can see why that's sexist, or I can see why that's racist. And they have a better understanding of the world, and they have a better understanding of why these things matter in comic books. And I think by doing it behind closed doors and by doing it secretively, it's like you're just working to silence someone rather than having people who read comic books, who are invested in it, understand maybe some of the issues at heart. Like, I would rather be educated about something rather than have my decisions made for me.
Well, it betrays their motives, I think. Either they are ignorant that their behavior is not creating a teaching moment, is not creating a constructive environment for society to actually advance. If Mark Waid really does believe that there is some purpose served by his behavior, he has not served that purpose. His belief is incorrect. He has not advanced or progressed any message of his with this behavior. The second thing is, it could be, instead of just a misguided attempt, it could be just an actual power grab, an actual attempt to grab market share away from a comic book artist that isn't signed up with Marvel or whatever. So by destroying or attempting to destroy this other comic book artist, there's more market share available, and there's less people criticizing what Marvel's doing means that Marvel can get away with more or whatever. So this could be either just a misguided attempt to shut down somebody he disagrees with, or at worst, it really could be an attempt to manipulate the market in an illegal way.
It's worth noting that a lot of Marvel's comic sales recently are basically in the toilet. They are dropping titles left and right. Their sales are terrible. And there is a big disconnect between them and their fans, and some people have speculated, and this is pure speculation, I will preface it with that Marvel has been very careful to talk to Disney and their investors and the other people who don't know what's going on, and basically saying, don't worry about it, it's not us, it's something else. So they're looking for ways to blame things. And if someone comes out of left field and suddenly provides what the market really wants and does really successfully, people at Disney might look at them and go, okay, so you're a multi-million-dollar comics book company that we purchased. You're getting this much in sales for your top-line comics. This is a guy from somewhere in the United States and two artists who just outsold some of your best work by a lot in a month. What's going on? So that too, I think, is a concern for them, because if it comes to light that they're working in the industry but they're not providing what the clients really want, they're just shoving garbage out and saying, the fans aren't sophisticated enough to understand it, then that's a problem. That means they won't be able to continue doing that. That means they will have to stop being the super progressive, super happy comics club who are just putting out whatever they think the people should be reading, and they'll actually have to go back to making
Yeah.
comics people want, and they don't want to do
Yeah,
that.
I hear you, but I think they're being a bit hyperbolic or a bit scaredy cat of the power of this Jawbreakers Lost Souls comic and diversity in comics. They're handing Zack way more power than he actually has. They're literally handing it to him. They're saying, here, we aren't going to handle this power responsibly, so we're just going to give it to you,
Sure.
is what they're doing. They don't realize they're doing it. If they had just kept their mouths shut and kept going, there is so much market share that Marvel has. I mean, come on, Black Panther set so many records. They have nothing to worry about.
Yeah, but that's
they don't
Marvel
have
films.
to acknowledge Zack's message.
That's Marvel film.
They can make-
not Marvel Comics.
Oh,
Yeah.
really? There's completely separate entities? Am I being nuts
Well,
here?
they're
Is this-
all different branches of Marvel now. So there's Marvel Comics, Marvel Movies, and
Well,
so on.
sure, but I mean, they're all related.
Sure, they're all related, and all the profit goes to Disney. But
But what I'm saying is that there's nothing achieved. They don't like no matter how much diversity in comics message grows, I don't see it affecting Marvel in
it
any
wouldn't
way.
affect Marvel movies, certainly. But it might.
I don't think it would really affect their written comics either. Do you? I mean, I don't read graphic novels. Just I don't have anything against them. I just have only so much time in my life. Do you read them, and do you really think the market is small enough that
Well, I mean, we're talking
diversity in
about-
comics could impact Marvel physical comics?
Yeah, they certainly
or
could.
digital comics?
Marvel's circulation for their comic books is really low. I mean, it's worth remembering that Marvel Films is using 20-year-old comic book storylines for their source material, whereas the material that is being put out by Marvel Comics, people watch the films, they really like them, they go to buy the new comics, and then they find, wait, this is nowhere near as good as the old stuff. What's going on? I was a subscriber for She-Hulk's new line that was done last year. The art was horrible, the writing was terrible, and I ended up unsubscribing pretty soon afterwards.
Well, that must make you a racist, right?
Apparently I don't like green women, but, I don't know.
That's like the response that a lot of people get is, you don't like this, therefore there's something wrong with you.
Yes, that's...
And this is just a horrible like response to someone not liking an art piece, an art form or art piece or specific work of art.
Right.
And you don't get to tell another person why they don't like another work of art or what that means about them. That is the weirdest kind of gatekeeping I have ever encountered in my life.
Yeah, She-Hulk is a superpowered lawyer. She is more lawyer than superhero, and she gets written terribly, which is really sad. She was also the original Deadpool. And she was the first female superhero to be created not by some ridiculous tragedy like most of the other female superheroes are, which is kind of neat. Sorry, I'm being all fanboy for a moment. Getting back on topic, though.
No, you're fine.
What you're saying is right, and I think we're kind of coming at this from the same point or direction. The creators at Marvel Comics are putting out work, and when it doesn't do well, they say, oh, it's the fault of X. And that's the excuse they give their bosses. So when Mark Waid sidles in and they say, okay, why is Jawbreakers outselling you X to Y? And they're like, I mean, what can you say? Suddenly, everything you've been saying to explain your poor sales and the contraction of the market
That could be part
is
of
just
it.
baseless now.
Is this really partially influenced by people who have performed poorly? They're trying to explain, like you just said, why Jawbreakers is doing great, but comic book stores don't want to sell it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you find out that it's because Mark Waid and others have been trying to prevent them from selling it, and they don't really have a good reason other than they want to increase their own sales because they work for companies whose motives are profits in the comic or graphic novel industry.
Right. That's the purpose of the company, but the people who are doing...
If anybody wanted a conflict of interest here, there's obviously a conflict of interest for Mark Waid to be saying, hey, you shouldn't sell this comic. By the way, sell my other comics.
Yeah.
That's a serious conflict of interest. Although it's a conflict of interest in the markets is not illegal like that.
Yeah.
It's then the activity of trying to take extra steps instead of just saying, hey, we make a better product, don't buy our competitor's product. They're saying, hey everybody, let's secretly not sell our competitor's product while we pretend to pre-order our competitor's product so that we can make the statistics look good for our bosses. Wow. Yeah, I think that deserves an FTC complaint and probably some kind of unfair competition lawsuit. And I hope that it happens sooner than later so that he gets his settlement sooner or later, because it sounds like Marvel wants nothing to do with this now that they've learned what's going on.
It'll be very interesting to see what happens anyway, and hopefully it's something that can be covered on the show here, and we can follow up what happens.
This wasn't even supposed to be this wasn't even on the list today, and I just, I saw his follow-up video yesterday, and that gave me... I don't like to report on these things when there's only one half of one side. So here at least I've got a whole half, or a whole side, one half of the issue. The other side doesn't seem to be wanting to explain itself. I have searched and searched for an hour this morning before the show. I searched for what's the other side of this, what's Mark Waid's meritorious side of this. Where's a link or something where he explains why he's right, and instead I just see more and more links to Facebook accounts saying things that look not meritorious. So please, do your own research before participating in the Jawbreakers issue. But it sounds like this is some illegal censorship going on, or market...
just regarding censorship...
Market influence or coercion.
What is it? Is it First or Second Amendment you guys have? I forget.
We have a First Amendment that protects free speech against government intrusion.
Right.
It does not protect markets from the speech of competitors. However, there are other laws that prevent competitors from participating in certain unlawful business practices, which are basically business practices that don't have anything to do with the actual business. Instead, like this kind of thing, like going behind backdoor, metaphorical backdoors on Facebook groups and whatever, and colluding with other supposedly independent comic book stores to create a situation that the vendor will not be able to explain, that Richard Meyer will see a number of pre-orders canceled, and the pre-orders will be canceled, on a day or whatever, and it won't make any sense because nothing happened on that day or whatever, and he's going to be seriously confused when people who are working with him and he has sales contracts with should not be acting in bad faith. Signing a contract or agreeing to sell his graphic novel just so you can mess with him is illegal, is quite an unlawful business practice. If you don't actually want to sell his book, you just say, I'm sorry, we don't want to sell your book. You don't say, yes, we do, and then cancel, later on and make up a story. That's not only childish and immature, but it's illegal.
To give you an example of why people are being turned off Marvel, okay? I put a link into the stream chat. I'm just going to drop it into sharing. But in an issue of their Spider-Gwen comic, which is kind of a dimension-hopping, not Deadpool, female Spider-Man type character, they took one of their big bad guys, who is MODOK, and turned him into Donald Trump. Because it's...
All right, are we kidding?
Yeah, no, this is the kind of...
That really does look a little bit like Donald Trump. Now, you did prime me. You did prompt me and tell me that this was going to be Donald Trump. So maybe I might not have saw Donald Trump in that face.
Let me find a picture of what MODOK normally looks like. And you can compare and consider for yourself whether or not this is the same as what it used to be.
And this is what you're saying he used to
This is what he
look
normally
like.
Looks like.
So, not Trump-like.
Yeah, not Trump-like at all.
Not at all Trump-like, and then the new one looks like this. That's much more Trump-like.
Yeah,
I mean...
Yeah, it was really weird.
I get it. Now, for artists have a First Amendment right to criticize Trump and to include, turn their characters into whatever. If they want to make Iron Man someone else, if they want to make She-Hulk, that's absolutely okay. They're allowed to do that. And their user base is allowed to not like that or not buy the comic books because they didn't like the change. It's a two-way street. It's not because people are racist or because people are anti-SJW automatically. It's the market's choosing things, and then you have to go and explain why. And if the first place some of these people go to is, oh, the markets must be racist, I mean, I guess you could like look at the Times and say some people out there must be racist, therefore some part of the markets must be racist or must be whatever your blame du jour is. But so far, I haven't seen any reason why Richard Meyer and Zack and Diversity in Comics has done anything other than tick the industry off or tick Mark Waid and a couple others off by criticizing the art, their art and others' art in their comics and graphic novels, which he's perfectly allowed to do. And frankly, if people disagreed with his critiques, they wouldn't go along with his critiques. They wouldn't subscribe to his channel, and they wouldn't buy his Jawbreakers graphic novel. So why we can't have this one on the merits, I don't know. Somebody would have to ask Mark Waid. And others. There were others in that as well. I don't mean to just pile on Mark Waid. So that is our show, everyone. Thank you very much to everyone for joining me. Thank you very much to all of our Patreon supporters. Without you, this channel might not be possible. YouTube is still messing with its Adpocalypse bot, and the live stream that we did on YouTube 2 Saturdays ago got instantly demonetized and the channel instantly depromoted for hosting that live stream. So if anybody's still wondering why the live streams aren't on YouTube, that's why. So thank you very much to the Patreon supporters that make this whole thing possible. We have Kareem Harper sponsoring at the $500 level in May. Thank you very much to Kareem. We are working hard on your story and we'll be in contact with you. Thank you also very much to my $50 plus supporters, DJ Gilcrease, John Steele, Gavin Barnard, Andy the Godslain, Kyle Mudrak, Eevi, Verement, Tayne, John H. Andersen, Sean McNamara, Michael Pearce, and William Gonzalez. Thank you very much for your support at the $50 plus level. I am almost done editing down DJ Gilcrease's Lex Mark video that he sponsored months ago, and I swear that will be out this week. I had something unexpected come up last week, and so this week should be it. And thank you very much to the $5 plus supporters scrolling on the LED panel behind me and on the screen on the video when we do the VODs. We had a very good week this week preparing the Jamie Walton interview and then shooting the Jamie Walton interview. Jamie Walton is the co-founder of the Wayne Foundation with Kevin Smith. Filmmaker Kevin Smith and Jamie Walton fight human trafficking together as the Wayne Foundation, and we are working on an edit to our 3.5-hour interview with her about what she does and how we can all help the human trafficking situation. I appreciate you all. I love you all. I am, of course, Leonard French, your favorite copyright attorney.
Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Come on up, boy. Yes. Hi. 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 Oh, let's focus. Hi. Hi. Hi, my dog. Who is messaging us? Lots of people on Twitter. You want one of these dry treats? They're like cookies, but they're not really that great. Happy Mother's Day, everyone!